Welcome to This Is My Story, where everyday women share their stories of struggles and setbacks that have shaped their lives. I'm your host, Melissa Touch. In today's episode, Rachel Broussard, a mom, wife, and therapist, shares with us a unique life journey that includes navigating the challenges of a teen pregnancy, making the courageous choice to place a child for adoption, as well as her own journey to adoption years later. Rachel also talks about her experiences with interracial marriage, raising biracial children, and the invaluable lessons she's learned about setting healthy boundaries while parenting a young adult and learning to surrender control. Before we jump into today's episode, don't forget to follow us on our social media and subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find all our social media links as well as more information about us at thisismystorypodcast.com.
My name is Rachel, and this is my story.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you. I know this story. I think I have asked pretty much every question I'm going to ask you. I feel like I drilled you on. We were going to a women's retreat. I don't know if you remember this. And I think I drilled you the whole way there on all these questions because it's just, I love the way it goes full circle. Your story does. And, not a lot of people have this story. And it ends a lot of different ways sometimes for people. And so I'm excited that you agreed to share it. So,
oh, yeah, of course.
So can you take us back? I'm guessing this would be fall 1998 based on the timeline. So you're around 17 years old and you discover you're pregnant.
Yes. So probably, I guess it was actually June of 98 is when I found out I was pregnant at the age of 17. Probably a year prior was when I kind of just struggled with looking to boys and guys to give me validation and make me feel good about myself. And so, found myself pregnant. And of course, immediately I was scared half to death. And of course, when my parents found out, they were disappointed, devastated. There was just a lot of just shame and guilt that came along with that. And what we ended up deciding to do is we found a maternity home for unwed mothers. It was a Christian maternity home. It was actually located in Fort Smith, Arkansas, called Hannah House. I love this because we had looked at many different other homes, but my mom and dad's best friends, their daughter actually was living in Fort Smith at the time, and we all grew up together. And so they're the ones that told us about it. So, and look, they've lived a lot of different places. And so it just so happened that they were there at that point in time and knew about this place. And I'm forever grateful for that.
So was it your decision or was it your parents are we're shipping you off, you're a disgrace?
It wasn't like that at all. One of the things, my parents did not want me returning to school. So it was my senior year of high school. They did not want me going to school pregnant. So I didn't start school in the fall at all. I knew just because of the home environment and just, it was just toxic. There was a lot going on. Our relationships had become very strained and just all kind of things. And ultimately, I made the choice. My dad and I went and visited a bunch of these homes. And honestly, I think it was the best decision that I made. But ultimately, it was my choice. They didn't force me to do it. But I think it was the best environment to prepare me for what was ahead.
So when you were looking at all these maternity homes with the intention to go there, did you know right then, I'm going to put this baby up for adoption? Had that already been decided?
No, not at that time. There was just kind of a lot of unknowns. At that point in time, I might have been 2, maybe 3 months pregnant. When we started doing these things. And so at that time really like still kind of in that shock phase of like not knowing really what to do or what was going on. So at that point in time, no, I would say that really those discussions hadn't begun.
So what was your experience like being pregnant and being away from home? So, I know as an adult being pregnant, I called my mom a lot. I wanted to talk to her a lot.
Yeah.
So did you have any kind of relationship like that with your mom while you were pregnant? Or was it like you deal with you just talk to the people there, don't involve me?
Well, so my parents, of course, were, disappointed and, they were going through their own, grief and issues and, feelings towards it. But they were super supportive. We only, at the maternity home, we only had phone time like at certain times. So it wasn't like I could call them all the time.
And this was pre-cell phones.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. So landline, and of course long distance. But yeah, I mean, I would talk to them. They would actually come visit me from time to time. I did actually, like during Christmas, I came home for about 2 weeks. So, the experience it was difficult, but at the same time, you are in a home with, I don't even remember how many other girls, but at one time there may have been like 15 other women and girls in the home with me that were also pregnant, so we're all going through this together. We had wonderful ladies. The staff there was amazing. And we just really kind of supported each other. And I really believe that environment, though, gave me the opportunity to actually love and enjoy my pregnancy. Again, at home, and even when maybe I visited with my parents at times, it was almost still like a touchy subject kind of thing. You know what I mean? And so like when I was in the home and around the other girls and everybody else, like I could find joy in this baby, and enjoy being pregnant. And so that, I believe it just created such a healthier environment for me to go through the pregnancy and enjoy it and get the care I needed and all of that.
How was it with your siblings when you came back home to visit? How was that relationship with them?
If I remember correctly, I want to say, I'm not quite sure if my brother was living at home. So I have an older brother. He's 3 years older than me. And then my sister is 8 years younger than me. And actually, she is adopted. And so that was a larger age gap. So she was about 10-ish, 9, 10 at the time. So she kind of was she saw everything. My brother, I know, was in college. He was living outside of the home. Of course, it also kind of distanced our relationship. The father of the baby, my brother knew. And so it was just an awkward kind of situation. At the same time, my baby was mixed, was biracial. And so that kind of created another element to the story and to how my parents and family felt, also because they did not at that point in time agree with interracial relationships. So that was kind of just like an added layer to their just kind of disappointment and anger and all the things that they were going through. And I think with my sister, again, she was 10 at the time. We didn't really talk about it much. We just kind of continued the relationship we had. And, I just didn't really talk about it much.
Knowing 10-year-olds, she was probably the most accepting.
Yeah. Either that or like, I don't know what to say,
Yeah. I'm just going to pretend like nothing's wrong. It's all the same. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
So at what point did you decide to put the child up for adoption?
So I would say probably around like November, December-ish of 98, I started contact with an adoption agency in Little Rock, Arkansas. And so I began meeting with them, and I had all along, you know, at this point in time at Hannah House, it was a Christian maternity home. And I'd been saved since I was 8 and baptized then, but I had never really experienced and knew what a relationship with Christ was. And so that is one of the, I guess, the beauties of this as well, is that being at Hannah House, I I was able to develop a relationship with Christ. So I began with all of these, decisions and things going on. I just began really, just giving my life to Him, like praying. We were in the Bible a lot. We were, praising and in worship and just all of these things. So I really, really started praying about it. And I just felt like that's what God wanted me to do. That's what He felt what was best for not only me, but for my child. And so we began pursuing that. And look, I say this all the time. Like I mentioned before, my sister was adopted. My parents adopted my sister. I was 8 years old when she was born, and we've had her since she was like 6 weeks old. We went to pick her up. And so at those moments when I was going through this, I remember thinking and knowing, 10 years prior, God was preparing me for what I needed right now. I had a view and an experience of the other side of adoption that, man, not many people have. And I was provided with the beauty and the joy that comes from adoption. And so I just knew I wasn't, by all means, it was difficult, but I wasn't fearful of, I guess, the process, and what maybe, again, the other side might look like.
Giving up a child for adoption, no matter your age, can be very emotional. So was there ever any regret, even on the day you gave birth?
What was great was, of course, I prepared for this. And so when he was born on March 7th, 1999, 2 days after my birthday, after my 18th birthday. And I got to spend 3 days in the hospital with him, actually. Yeah, it was great. My parents had come. So, we were able to spend time with him. We actually had a dedication ceremony in the hospital that we had already prepared for. One of the girls that I had really gotten close to at Hannah House, which she had chosen to keep her baby, and she had given birth about 2 months prior. She came. There was just so many people there. So we were able to do that. And for me, that was special. That was very important to me to be able to do. And so I got to spend time with him and just enjoy those moments, take pictures, all the things. And throughout the process, I actually got to choose the birth family. And we had kind of been in communication back and forth throughout the process. God just gave me this overwhelming peace about everything. And really, to this day, I have never once felt any regret or what ifs or should I have not or what. Like, I have never had a day or a moment or a thought of that. Even after he was born, I came home. So after I signed the papers, and the adoption agency picked him up from the hospital, I had 10 days to change my mind. And during that time, I actually came home to Louisiana, and spent that time with my family. And I remember my dad and we were on our way to a softball game at my high school that I had went to. And he told me, he was like, "Rachel, we can go get him if you want to." I'm gonna cry, but and I was like, no, he's where he needs to be. Like, this is it. And I've never regretted it. I know it was God's plan. I know this is what God wanted. And I had to let go of control of that. I had to let it go. And, I often think about that, how many people that go through that process of having to place a child for adoption, and maybe not all are the same circumstances I was, but it is so heartbreaking when they talk about maybe the regret and how much they miss them. And not that I don't, right? Like, I know one day, of course, my heart is that I will be able to meet him one day. But if not, that's what it is. And I'm okay with it.
He would be 24 now, right?
Whew, can we do the math?
I did the math for you already.
Yeah. He's like the same age as my niece. They were born in the same year. So
you got to choose the family.
Yes.
Have you stayed in contact? Like, did you actually know their names, or did you just get to choose like a profile?
It was I think what they call like semi-open adoption. So they did send me like a profile. I know their first names, not a last name. I know what state they live in, but not the like city and any addresses or anything like that. For the first year after he was adopted, it was required by the little contract, the adoption contract, that they send me pictures and things like that. And I want to say that probably continued till probably for the first 2 or 3 years. It did. Now, over that time as well, all our correspondence would go directly through the adoption agency. So I would also send things to him as well. I would write letters. I would update him on my life. I would send pictures. I would send him things for his birthday or for Christmas. I remember one year, and I would send that every year. So I just kind of continued to do that. One year, it was when you could make those ornaments, like Christmas ornaments, where you could like record something,
Aww.
like your voice or whatever. And look, I don't even know if he ever got any of that, right? Like, I would send it to that adoption agency, and where it went from there, I have no clue, I mean, I pray and I hope that he did, but, I'm not for certain. But it gave me joy in doing that. And for me, he's a huge part of my life and my family's life. My husband and children all know about him. Like, we talk about him. We remember and celebrate his birthday and, all of these things. So,
do you know what they named him?
Yes, they named him. So I named him Justice Trey at birth. They renamed him Johnny Alfred Raymond. Is Alfred Raymond is his middle names. I believe those are the grandfather's names. So he's and his adoptive father is named John as well. So but Johnny is his name. So yeah.
I know that you went on to college.
I
and
did.
You got a degree in social work, and your first job was as a foster care worker. Was that because of the experience that you had just gone through?
Absolutely. Crazy enough, I went into like my first semester of college in early education. Who knows why? Because I certainly couldn't be in a classroom these days. But anyway, immediately that first semester, I changed my major to social work, and that had a lot to do with it. There's many areas of social work that you can work in and do things. I ended up getting my bachelor's and then my master's in social work, and so my internship in my master's program was in the foster care system. And through that, when I was done with school, that was my first job. I was a foster care worker. And man, working there, my poor little heart, I ended up becoming a foster parent as well.
As a single woman.
As a single woman, yes. You would see all of these kids that just needed good homes. And I just could not. And so I ended up getting certified as a foster parent, just to foster. I had no intention of adopting or anything. But yeah, I got into that really quickly. And it was very rewarding. It was great. It really was.
You ended up with Tavis through that experience. And
Yes. So
I know it was a bumpy road, a lot of back and forth. So can you just kind of walk us through that journey with fostering him and then ultimately adopting him?
Sure. So Tavis is my 21-year-old, and he was 3 years old when he was placed in my home as a foster child. And like I said, I had really just gotten certified just to kind of foster and help out.
And this was baby Rachel. You were like, what?
I don't
21?
even know. Like, like 24,
Yeah.
25. Yeah. So, so I got into it, and he came along, and he just kind of stayed, right? I had him for 3 years at first. And I guess around year 2, they were like, hey, would you want to adopt him? And no questions asked, like, absolutely, by that time, he had become family. It was like he was my child, and, grandma and grandpa and granny and pop, he just is a part of the family. There was no way I was not going to adopt him. And so we kind of started working towards that. And after he had been in my home for 3 years, the state decided to send him back to his birth mom. And that was really tough. I look back now and look, I worked for the state, and I can't tell you how many people I called and talked to and all the things to say, hey, this isn't a good idea. I tried everything that I could, to keep him in my home. But unfortunately, that's just not the way it worked. And I had to eventually, again, just kind of let go and surrender to that and give that over to God. It wasn't mine to control. And so he went back to his biological mom, and he was there about a year, almost a year to the day that he went home, that the state took him back into custody. And so he came back into my home at that time. Of course, I was so, glad that he was in a safe environment at that point in time. And we were able to eventually, his birth mother gave up her rights to him. And so, and at that point in time, I had found a husband. I had met my husband actually when Tavis was transitioning back to his birth mother. And so when he came back into custody, he was able to live with me. And in the meantime, Linton and I had gotten married. And so actually in 2011, Tavis was 9. So started out age 3. It wasn't until he was 9 years old that we were able to actually adopt him, that it was finalized.
Linton was not in the picture at first when you first had him in your home. And then y'all become engaged, and then he's kind of in the picture some. Did he understand we're a package deal? If he comes back, it's both of us. Like, you're going to be an automatic father.
Yeah, it was understood. And kind of like, and I don't really know, but the one of the first days that I met Linton, or the first time he actually met Tavis, he came over to the house, and I sat on my back porch and just watched him jump on the trampoline and play with Tavis and like do all these things. And I just sat back. And we both remember this day very vividly, Linton and I. But just sitting back thinking, wow, like, this is it, And so really from the get-go, Linton just kind of dove right in. But yeah, now that doesn't come with the difficulty.
Right.
So I think Linton was all in, but it's funny that Tavis was the one that had the problem. It was very difficult for him to allow somebody else in our lives. There were many times that, like, Linton, I remember one time in particular, Linton had come over to the house, and Tavis locked us out of the house. Like, we had walked outside or something, and like wouldn't let us back in. And like just things like that, and like he would make comments or different things. But eventually, I think when he realized Linton wasn't going anywhere and he was sticking around, and, he came around and, was okay with it. I remember the night before our wedding, it was fun. It was kind of funny, but, I was trying to like prepare him that Linton would be moving into our home, not just visiting, but like actually moving in there. And he was like, well, and I think it was like a 3-bedroom at home at the time, but he was like questioning, well, where's he going to sleep? Like, you have a bed, I have a bed. And like, I think he didn't have a bed or anything like in the other room, and he's like, well, like, where's he going to sleep? And I never even thought of that. Like, that would be a question, So of course I had to explain, well, he's going to sleep in my room, it's going to be. So it was definitely a transition. I think we all grew closer though through that. And again, as we were able to adopt him, and really it wasn't until we adopted him. He never called me mom whatsoever. And I never pressured him to, but he never called me mom until we adopted him. And just kind of out of the blue, he called us mom and dad. I was always Ray Ray before is what he would call me. So yeah, but it was definitely a tough road. And Tavis struggled through it too. We had ups and downs, and, it was a long journey to get to his adoption, but I wouldn't change it for anything. Like I said, I think we all learned a lot through the process. Again, another time in my life that Rachel can't control something. I got to let it go,
What you haven't said is that Tavis is a Black child.
Yes.
How did that? Yeah. We'll get to Linton in a minute. Okay. How did your parents? Because that was like kind of full circle, and like, did you feel like this was a do-over? Like, okay, I didn't, I chose not to keep my child because it just wasn't, for his future. It was a better option, but this, I can do something for this child. Did you see your child in that child?
So, what's funny is you would think maybe I would, but I never really did. I just, I did know, like, when they placed Tavis in my home because he was Black, of course I had that feeling of, what will my family say? Will they accept him? How will this, But man, they had no problem, at least none that I saw or that they said, right? And like, they just kind of slipped into the roles of loving and caring for him. Even my grandmother who really struggled with when I got pregnant and with my interracial relationships. Like, Tavis was her little like baby forever until she passed away. Like, Tavis was just special. He was and still is someone who just like drags you in, and like, he's just the cutest thing. And people just love him. And so it was so easy for my family to just embrace and love on him. It was just beautiful. And everyone in my life, really. I'd never really compared the two or thought like, he's taking the place of justice or anything like that. Tavis was just Tavis, and he was there, and we were going to love him, and he brought and has brought so much to our lives and to our family.
You were a single white woman at the time. raising or fostering a Black child. Did you run into any problems with that?
There's always the looks or like, I don't understand this, like I can't put this two and two together. Tavis and I don't remember, it's funny, I don't remember how old he was, but one time we were in Walmart and a lady walks up to us and he had to have been younger, probably like maybe 6 or 7. And she looked at us and she told him, she said, "Oh, you have your mother's eyes." And and we just kind of looked at each other like, okay, like, thank you, and just kind of kept on walking. But it was, and people would ask questions, especially then when, and I know we'll get to that, when Linton came around, it kind of created more questions and that sort of thing. But, it was important for me. And I don't think I really realized the importance of it until Tavis was a little bit older. But I wanted him to also, like, I know there were times that he felt uncomfortable in regards to it, especially with kids at school, "Oh, that's your mom? Like, how's that your mom?" All the questions that he would get. I know that, and we had conversations about that. I know that was difficult for him at times, throughout his school days and things like that.
Did he have once he came back, because he had kind of been in and out for a little bit, did you have any problems with him feeling secure in the fact that that was going to be his home now forever? Or like, did he, or that trust that you were always going to be there for him, that you weren't going to leave him, that you weren't going to send him away?
I think, and which I guess I failed to mention as well, but during that year that he wasn't in my home, I still had contact with him pretty often. Over the 3 years that he was in my home at the beginning, his birth mom and I had, developed, we knew each other, we had each other's phone numbers, things like that. So over that period of time, she actually relied on me a lot during that year that he was with her. And so I would often go pick him up for the weekend, or she would call and say, "Hey, he missed the bus." I would go all the way across town, pick him up, make sure he was at school. I would attend like parent teacher conferences at times at school, or like things of that nature. So I think that he felt very secure in coming back, to live with me. I think he has always known that he could trust and depend on me. I look back at it now, maybe I created a little too much of that. But it was also a loss for him. When he was home, he felt he enjoyed being with like his family, like where he came from, who he was, and he connected, with his cousins and all of these things. So I tried to continue that as well, continue those connections. We would have his cousins over from time to time, or, different things, just because like he longed for that. And I knew he did. And of course, it wasn't that he didn't want to be with us, but that was a huge part of his life, and people that looked like him and that he could connect to,
You went on to have 2 other boys with Linton. Did Tavis ever feel resentment towards them?
So, and by the way, Linton is also Black.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
As well. So yes, we have 2. We ended up having 2 other sons, Jeremiah and Bowen. Jeremiah is now 11 and Bowen is 6. Tavis was super excited when we were pregnant with Jeremiah. He wanted a sibling. He was an only child, with his birth mother. So he was really, really excited. And he was a great He's a great big brother. As they got older, and as Tavis got older, and then of course Bowen came around, I would say probably when Tavis was in his teens, maybe ninth grade, 10th grade, he struggled with looking and connecting with them as his brothers. Jeremiah and Bowen knew nothing else. They've never lived without Tavis, right?
Yeah.
So Tavis is their brother. That's just who he is. And regardless of whether he was adopted or not, but Tavis struggled with feeling a part of and connected to them as his brothers, or even as he struggled with as a part of the family at some point in time of his life. And I know he kind of still struggles with that as well. And so I know that has been difficult, but he has always, loved on and been a great brother to Jeremiah and Bowen. But I do know, because he's expressed that before, that it's difficult for him at times to feel like that's his actual brothers,
Aw. So how is your relationship with him now that he's an adult?
Oh gosh. Man, I wasn't ready. I was not ready. Lord have mercy. For these teenage years and all the things. So, currently Tavis is actually living with his birth mother.
Oh, wow. I did not see that coming.
He actually moved out of our house. Man, I guess it's been about a year or two. And he's kind of had to figure out life. And so he's living with his birth mother. He is, we still are in contact with him, though. He comes and, hangs out with us. He calls, he texts, all the things. When he needs some money, or somewhere, we're available. He makes sure to send us a message. When he turned probably 18, 19, he kind of started seeking out his birth family just to kind of see. And I think overall that has been, I think he needed to experience that. Now his birth mother still struggles with some addiction and things of that nature, and really isn't the best environment for him to be in. But again, I've had to learn how to set some healthy boundaries for myself. And again, just let it go. I got to give this to God, because it's not for me to try to control and figure out. And so Tavis has had to make some decisions and figure some things out for himself. I also think, though, that he has grown. It has opened his eyes to some things. It has also provided some opportunities for him that maybe he wouldn't have had. And so we're still on the journey. We're still learning. We're still loving. We are, again, this parenting thing never ends.
Right. Yeah.
So, but it was tough. It was tough adjusting to not having him in the home. And that was a difficult transition for Jeremiah and Bowen, especially being younger. I think Jeremiah was maybe 8 or 9 at the time, and Bowen was only 4 or 3. And so it was difficult for them to kind of understand that, when they become adults, those things happen. And it still is. Bowen struggles with it probably the most. He constantly, wants to call Tavis. I want to see him. He
Aww.
misses him. I know we pray for Tavis every night during prayer time, and so yeah, it was a difficult transition, and I would assume that it's that way. Just again, when siblings begin to start moving at the house.
Yeah. So Juliet is a senior this year, and John Hayden even, she spent 3 weeks away at a university this summer at a camp, and another week at another camp at another university. So she was gone for 4 weeks this summer and hardly contacted us. And I was like, this is how it's going to be. She's just going to leave us and then only contact us when she needs money or when I force her to. But,
Exactly.
John Hayden, who is the same age as Jeremiah almost, he has spent even, we're still early in the senior year. It's only September, but he's already
Right.
like, I don't want her to leave next year. And he's like,
Yeah.
come do this with me. You're going to be leaving us soon and all of this. And so I imagine, and it's hard for me even, letting her go away this summer and getting that dose of, can she really take care of herself? Can she really make good decisions? Is she really ready for this?
Yeah.
I would imagine that it's so much harder for you knowing that he's in a place where there is some addictions going on and in that environment that might not be as safe and is not a positive environment. Like
Ultimately, yeah.
Like, are you just, I guess, like you said, you got to just let it go. But that's so hard to be like, I don't want him there because I don't want him to fall into the same patterns as his mother, his biological mother.
And I've at first, it was very difficult for me. And look, I have had Tavis has been homeless. He has slept in his car. He has been many things since he walked out of our house. And that is probably one of the hardest things. Even I know the adoption was difficult, with justice, but man, having to watch him be in some of those situations and not go and scoop him up and save him from those things was probably one of the hardest things that I have had to do as a mom. Like I said, because of his situation growing up, I protected him from so much. I shielded him from a lot of things and I always went and scooped him up, and I just having to then set some really healthy boundaries for myself and really for our family. I had to let those things happen because I was doing a disservice to him by just coming and scooping him up. And so I've had to allow him to experience some things. He's had to fail. He's had to literally fall on his face and to learn again, to develop some character and learn how to make good decisions and things of that nature. And I constantly continue to remind myself that God did not, I know this is not the end. This is not what God's final plan for Tavis is. But I do believe that Tavis has got to go through this and he's got to experience this to get where God wants him to be and to get where he needs to be. And so I just got to keep believing that. And that's where I kind of have to just put mama aside, because Mama Bear over here would be doing it all. You know what I mean? That probably over the last 2 years. And look, it's been tremendously hard. There are many times that I have cried myself to sleep, that I have cried to Linton and going to therapy and all, you know what I mean? But I know in the end, one, it is creating space and opportunity for growth for me, not only as a parent, as a mom, but spiritually and in my walk in relationship with Christ. And so it has made me rely on Christ a whole lot more. And so I'm doing what God has called me to do as a mom, and it's been tough, but I see the rewards. And God, gives me little glimpses of okay, Rachel, I want you to see this. It's going to be okay. And so I just kind of have to continue to put my faith in that, continue to pray and make sure my relationship with God is where it needs to be, because I would not be able to do it without him. And so, right now, Tavis is actually working at the church. He got a job there. And so I often say, thank God, like he is in a safe environment and a good environment there where people are present to maybe pour into him. And so I gotta just keep moving forward and having faith that God's got this. And I know he does. He always has. I mean, I've seen it from way back when. He's always taking care of me. He's always taking care of my family. And so I just got to continue to put my faith in that and trust in that.
I'm glad he's in a good spot, because I know that your 8 to 5, who you're around, has a big influence on you. And I'm sure that like that mama heart just got a sigh of relief when he got that job. You can't control where he is at night or what he's doing on the weekends, but at least,
Yeah. Yeah. And it is. It's kind of one of those times you say, thank you, God.
You mentioned that Linton is Black.
Mm-hmm.
We're holding that off because I wanted to talk about interracial marriage. So you have an interracial marriage, and I know you said that you guys have had to work through some difficulties. First of all, going back to your parents, when you first brought Linton around them, what was the reaction?
I knew, like, I already had it planned that when I introduced them, Linton, to my family, that I would most likely have to choose him or my parents or my family. Like, I was prepared. Like, that's where my mindset was. And of course, not everybody was gung ho, but they were more, I guess, open to the idea of the interracial relationship. And this was like, again, another time that I had to, and my dad was a little bit easier. He was like, Rachel, if you're happy, I just want you to be happy, and so my mom was a little bit harder. But over time, and it was pretty quickly, because Linton and I got engaged like 9 months after into our relationship. And so, and he knew though that I wanted my family's blessings from that. And so it didn't take them long. And I don't really think either one of them was like totally in love with the idea at that point in time. But again, one of those situations where I couldn't control it. It didn't matter what I did. I couldn't change my parents' hearts. There was only one person that could, and that's God. And I tell you what, like, I am so grateful and thankful. And I tell my parents this all the time, especially my mom, that she allowed God to change her heart and to work in her own life and change some beliefs, some old beliefs and things, and open her eyes to something new. And I say all the time now, like, I think my mom probably loves Linton more than me. I'm okay. But, it all worked out. And again, and look, it wasn't always great too with his family as well. He comes from a family that, there's not a lot of interracial marriage. And so he was a little worried about his family as well. And it took some time for them to be welcoming for me as well. And we were now combining totally, like, two totally different cultures, like night and day, black and white, literally, right? He's grew up in the country. I'm a city girl. Like, I mean, so many things that are different. Everything was the way we lived, the way we did life, our thoughts, whatever. And so we had to, we were combining the two. And so it was super important for me. And look, we've been married for 13 years now. And over this time, we continuously grow and learn and seek to understand each other and our own cultures and thoughts over time. I remember when, now it's going to I'm going to forget the deal in Minnesota with the whole black and white issue. Anyway, came about. That was a huge deal, especially with Linton's family. And we were able to kind of sit down with them and just kind of listen. And we talked about things and like really shared our how we felt and how we saw things. And I think that really brought us closer together. And my biggest thing is seeking to understand, right? I want to hear you. I want to know your heart. I want to know where you come from, and where your thoughts come from and why you think that way. And look, it's important to me because my children are biracial. Like, I want them to know and love the cultures and background that they come from. Tavis was probably, he might have been in third or fourth grade. One night we were sitting eating dinner and we were talking about being African American. And he was like, I'm not African American. And I was like, wow. Like, in that moment, I thought to myself, like, what have I been doing that he doesn't even know, like, that he's African American, right? Like, I haven't been doing my job very well, right? And I realized then that, like, this is important, and so and look, Linton's family has such they come from rich culture and heritage and legacy there that I want my kids to know and experience and be involved in, just as much as my family as well, And so it's just super important to us to be able to incorporate that and allow them to experience things a little bit differently. And I pray that they will, learn to love who they are. And I hope, again, it has to come from us. We got to teach them that. And so I just pray that, again, me and Linton continue to be open to those conversations in our own family and, be vulnerable in that because I want my children to be as well.
So unfortunately, we live in a society that often categorizes individuals based on the color of their skin.
Yep.
Has this caused any problems with your kids? Have they been pressured to identify as one race, or do they feel that pressure?
I think the older they get, the more they do. Jeremiah's 11. He's the one that has become more aware of that, especially when he has to fill out papers and mark whether I'm Caucasian, African American, whatever, all the things. And so that has been difficult. And sometimes, if I'm being real vulnerable and honest, for me as well, right? Like, I want to mark all the things, can I do 5 of them? You know what I mean? And so I think it's really just kind of been like I said, like an opportunity to hear how they feel about it and really just see where they're coming from and hear their hearts and know their struggles with it. And like I said, Bowen, he likes, at young that age, they like to categorize the color of our skin, right? And so, Linton's always been brown and Tavis as well. And so him and Jeremiah, he's like, I'm sorry, they're maybe tan or brown, I can't remember. And I'm clear. So by the way, white people are clear. So we allow him to do those things because that's how he's able to determine how we all look different. And so he's learning as well. But again, I think this is just an ongoing journey of understanding and really looking at who do I think I am? Who does God say what does God say about me? And how do I fit into, and do I have to fit into these categories, right? And so I know Jeremiah he wants, we're going to check the white and the black box. That's where he's at. And we often, and we talk about, that people that are of mixed race, especially when it's like 50-50 like that of Caucasian African American, they're considered black, and I said, because he sees that on a lot of his things. And I think because his skin is so much lighter, I think he identifies, more as white, but he's okay with it. He's been accepting of it. He has a lot of black friends, and so like, for me and Linton, it's like constantly keeping that communication open and the discussion there. And I want him to be able to feel comfortable talking about it, because I know there is going to be many more of it to come.
Yeah.
This doesn't just go away. And if we just ignore it, it doesn't go away either, And so I just want to kind of be upfront. And I think, again, like, we can look for many things, external things, to gain our worth and our self-esteem and how we see ourselves. And, we just like to, of course, pour into what God says we are, and what God says about you and how beautiful you are, and, and how God made you just the way he wanted you. And so I think that's important as well, just to kind of remind them what truly is important for them.
In light of all of the heightened racial tension, are you concerned for your boys as they grow, as they become older? Are you concerned for Tavis?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I have those thoughts. It's hard to not, and especially for Tavis, I know his heart and I know who he is. And, but he could easily, especially in the environments that he's in and where he's at, could easily get himself into, a situation. And so, it could definitely happen. And I can't say that I don't think about it. Of course I do. And that's where I just feel like I have to, one, educate my own sons, and also, though, kind of build and train them and maybe making better choices and decisions for themselves, but regardless of that, it could happen, really to anyone. And I hope it doesn't, but yeah, it's tough. Again, if I stayed in that, though, constant worry and constant thought of that, I'd be miserable. It would drive me crazy, especially, with Tavis. But I just have to continuously, like, look forward, and I got to flip that script and just put my faith and know that regardless of what happens, I'm going to trust God in it. That's it.
We talked about your teen pregnancy and putting the baby up for adoption, and then brought it back around. The story that I love of, how Tavis came to be in that adoption, and then talked about your kids and Linton and that interracial and those marriage and your biracial children. Out of all of that, are there any words of advice you have for anyone who is going through any of those things in their life, or, are having some challenges in any of those areas? Do you have any words of advice?
Yeah. And I think it's kind of been the theme of this story. And as I look back over my life, I see how God has just kind of like slowly chipped away and refined me and who I am. And, I'm a big controller. I like to be in charge and control things.
Me
just
too.
Ask my husband. Yeah. Well, you know what? Don't ask Linton, because he will have a lot to say. But, I've really had to really look at that act of surrender in my life and really rely on God for many things that I was constantly over time, like just trying to control. And that letting go and giving it over to God, but actually like following through and surrounding myself with people and in relationships that can support and love me through it. And again, just develop and strengthen and deepen my relationship with God. Like ultimately, like that's all I have. And that is, that's really what has gotten me through, because when we surrender, when we let go of those things, that's where the beauty happens. Like that's where our joy and our peace happens and comes from, right? Like that's how we get that. Because I guarantee the more I held on to it and worried and tried to control it, the worse off I was, And so for me, that has kind of just been the biggest blessing in all of that. And I'm still learning. Like I'm still every day. There are times that something will happen or Tavis will call and Mama wants to run right there and do it. And I have to, Linton's kind of my sounding board over here. Like, Rachel, you got to let that go, And so like, I continue to pour into God and pour into his word and just create some space to just let go. I got to recognize I can't do this on my own. And so I guess that's kind of the advice I have, man.
You sound so wise.
Oh, girl. I've had to go through some things. And again, I'm still learning and I'm still having to like put it down every day and let go. But I feel like, honestly, in the last couple of years, I have really just kind of found this freedom and joy in doing it. And my relationship with Christ has just blossomed. And like, it's brought me to places that I never thought I could experience, even going through all of this. And just the peace that I have is, I mean, you can't get that anywhere else. And it feels great,
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Oh my gosh, I enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us today on This Is My Story. If you'd like to be a guest on our show or know someone that has an inspiring story they'd like to share, please visit us online at thisismystorypodcast.com and fill out the contact us form. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to hear more inspiring stories, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. This has been Rachel's story. What's yours?